It's Thursday. Welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appealed to Nigerians to exercise patience as the economic hardship facing the country will soon be over. On the interview segment for tonight, we shall be discussing justice and politics in Nigeria with John Matthew, a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. This is Politics Tonight. Now let's begin with some developments in the polity. President Bola Tinubu has appealed to Nigerians to exercise patience as the economic hardship facing the country will soon be over. The president spoke at the inauguration of first phase of the Lagos Rail Mass Transit Red Line from Agbado to Oyingbo. He assured that his administration will continue the ongoing reforms and the fight against corruption. President Tinubu also took a jibe at the Nigeria Labour Congress for the decision to embark on a protest on the 9 months of his administration.
The hope is here. We have a governor in hope. And I'm standing before you, clinging to that hope, assuring you my belief that Nigeria will be out of economic problems. We just need to persevere, work hard, be assured. Allow me to throw a jab here. The labor union should understand that no matter how much we cling to our freedom and rights, to call for strike within 9 months of an administration is unacceptable. If you want to participate in the electoral process, wait on the 2027. They hope.
The National Assembly, where the Senate has invited Minister of FCT and the Commissioner of Police for the FCT to give detailed security briefing on the current security situation in the federal capital. The Senate's resolution follows a motion by the lawmaker representing Delta North Senatorial District, Ned Nwoko, on the kidnap incident that led to the death of one of his senior legislative aides. National Assembly correspondent TVC News reports.
The resurgence of activities of armed bandits, kidnappers in communities and highways and other heinous crime across the country has been a huge worry for many. Experts say Nigeria has all it takes to tackle insecurity, which has lingered for too long. In an interview with the former Inspector General of Police Mohammed Dahiru Abubakar, he says increased funding for the police and other security agencies will go a long way in reducing crime. He adds that intelligence gathering, training and retraining of security personnel to sharpen their competencies and improve their capabilities is also a key to restoring peace.
Security is a serious business, and security is never cheap anywhere in the world. Check. They need to take care of the police and the state security service very seriously, in terms of equipping, in terms of welfare. These are agencies of government that will go to bring information and intelligence and processes, and because they are part and parcel of the civil society. The military has an important role to play. They too need to be supported and assisted. So we need to go back to the rudiment, and officers and men of all the security agencies need very serious training. We need retraining, restructuring, and refunding of these services. Our recruitment policy has to change. We have to look for the right people, not people who want to come into the service because they are looking for a job.
The 16th Indigenous Inspector General of Police believes traditional institutions and other citizens have a role to play in the quest to tackling the myriad of security challenges currently plaguing the country.
And the community to have a responsibility to work in collaboration with the security agencies to provide the needed information that will assist them to fight the crime. Please go to the next police station proper close to here and tell them there is robbery 5 kilometers away. 3 things may happen. One, if you are lucky, they have a vehicle in that police station. If you are unlucky, the vehicle may not have foil. If you are unlucky, the number of personnel there are too few to be able to go and fight the armed robbers.
The call to the federal government to increase funding for security agencies, intelligence gathering, and information sharing to tackle insecurity is coming at a time communities and highways, especially in northern Nigeria, have continued to be a hotbed of banditry and kidnappers, which has forced many to abandon their ancestral homes for the fear of the unknown. Safely Darufai, TVC News Kusau.
Apologize for the mix-up of the visuals. To the National Assembly, where the Senate has invited Minister of FCT and the Commissioner of Police for the FCT to give detailed security briefings on the current security situation in the federal capital. The Senate's resolution follows a motion by the lawmaker representing Delta North Senatorial District, Ned Nwoko, on the kidnap incidents that led to the death of one of his senior legislative aides. National Assembly correspondent Judicial reports.
And from what you've said,
Senator Ned Nwoko briefs his colleagues on the tragic abduction of 19 persons, including his senior legislative aide, who was later killed by his abductors. The lawmaker recalls with sadness that distressing news has become one tragic loss too many, as he calls for more drastic measures to beef up security within the FCT.
The CP personally led the culprits who went to show them where they left the bodies. But I don't know about what happened with the others, but I'm sure that this Senate should be able to, through the recommendations, be able to find out what happened and take appropriate steps.
The Senate sympathized with the lawmaker over the death of his senior aide and adopted all resolutions made in the motion. The Senate also resolved to invite the Minister of the FCT and the Commissioner of the FCT Police Command for a closed session to obtain detailed report of efforts being made to tackle rising insecurity within the FCT.
They will invite the FCT Minister and the Commissioner of Police FCT to meet with the Senate in closed session to discuss the security of the FCT.
The Senate observed a minute of silence in honor of victims of bandit attacks and insecurity.
May the souls of the Galadima kidnapped victims rest in perfect peace.
TVC News, Abuja.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, we will get straight into our conversation for tonight. Please stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. This is Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am being joined by a legal practitioner, John Matthew, to focus on justice and politics in Nigeria. Mr. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Right. It's so good to see you again. The last time we had a conversation was 4 months ago during the Nasarawa State Governorship Election Petitions Tribunal process. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how will you assess Nigeria's democratic journey since 1999?
Well, I think to the extent that we've been able to transit successfully from one civilian administration to another, I would say we've made some progress. But I think more could have been done. It is important for us to understand that this democracy that was fought for by the sweat and blood of Nigerians who desire that they play a role in governance. And from 1999 up till date, there has been back and forth in progress. Back and forth in the sense that where we think we have made gains, those gains get rolled back almost by successful electoral cycle. So yes, we've been able to transit from one civilian administration to another successfully for over 24 unbroken years now. But I think much, much more needs to be done if we are to really enjoy the dividends of democracy.
Right, so we'll come back to what needs to be done, but it's often said that the worst civilian regime is better than the best military regime. Do you agree?
I don't, and I have my reasons. The basis of that assertion is only limited to the fact that people get to choose their leaders, as opposed to a military regime where leaders are imposed. But in all honesty, if democracy is advancement of society, I think some military regimes are even better preferred in terms of infrastructural development. And the indices are there. If you look at the regime of Sani Abacha, even with the vilification that followed his regime, most of the infrastructure that we enjoy today are traceable to that regime. Ditto the Babangida regime. That is not to say that democracy, military rule is preferable, but I'm saying that if the meaning of advancement in society is providing the needed dividends, then of course, by comparative analysis, you will say that even some of the military regimes did much, much better than what we have seen so far.
So this clamor for military rule from some quarters, as a lawyer, why do you think some people are making this call?
The reasons are not far-fetched. The truth of the matter is what we call democracy, which is a situation where leaders are chosen through a fair and credible process, has been eroded steadily. The gains that were made in the electoral process are gradually being rolled back. Before now, before some of these reforms, the basis of questioning our electoral process had to do with the rigging in the field in the course of elections. Now, with some of the reforms, the rigging of electoral results have gradually shifted from the politicians in the field to INEC, which is supposed to be the umpire. And so, people don't get the government they elected. And because of that, it is difficult to hold the democratically elected people, democratically elected, quote and unquote, to account. Because where you see people vote for a particular leader, and at the end of the day, it's a different person who is ruling in his state, it is difficult to hold him to account. And so some of the dividends that ought to have been enjoyed, some of the things that people expected a democratic system should have engendered, is not being felt at all. And it is made more worse now by the rising spate of insecurity and the economic hardship that has been occasioned by some of the programs of these democratic governments.
Well, Mr. Matthew, there are those who have said, all right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
When people feel this level of despondency because of the program of a supposedly democratic government, the insecurity in a democratic setting, people look back and see these things were not what we felt in military regimes that we fought for. These were not the things we fought for. And so, yes, the world over democracy is preferable, but the brand of democracy we're practicing here and the reality that we face possibly informs why some people are looking back with fond memories about what we used to obtain when we had military regimes.
Because I was going to say, with military regime, I mean, no freedom of speech, no respect for the rule of law, the rights, fundamental human rights is a no-no. And you still think we are at a disadvantaged position when we say civilian rule is better than military regime. Now, but with some West African countries taken over by the military, do you see this trend spreading on the continent?
I think military interventions are in response to the realities on the ground. And the realities are dictated by the downturn in the fortunes of people. When people feel that basics, such as food, shelter, infrastructure, are not provided, are unavailable, yet in the same situation, you find our leaders living in a completely different world. I mean, it is only natural for people to find that this system ain't working. And so, when people begin to feel that way, that sense of despondency, you wake up in the morning, you do not know what to do. You don't have anything to feed your family. You are unable to meet your basic needs as a person. What is the value of the freedom of speech to you when you can't feed? What is the value of the freedom to associate to you when you cannot take your sick child to the hospital? So these are some of the things that our leaders have failed to address. You must be able to put food on your table first before you begin to think about the freedom to associate or the freedom to speak. In fact, there are jokes and banters now that the only place you get a free meal now is in the prison. Because there you are incarcerated, yes, you've lost your freedom to move, but you are at least fed. People are dying of hunger. This is the basis. This is the basis why people have reached a conclusion that the democracy ain't working the way they expect it to. And this hardship is happening right in the midst of plenty because our elected leaders have not shown that they understand the difficulties that is happening with our people. When you see them live the kind of lives they live in the midst of hunger, when you see the kind of things that are done openly in the midst of this want, you begin to wonder, is it that we really do not have or that our leaders do not care? This is the bane of our democratic experience so far. And I think unless there's an urgency demonstrated by government to address this, gradually, what we're seeing as a joke might end up being the basis upon which the democratic experience could be truncated. Nobody's desirous of having a military regime, but the circumstances that people find themselves is what encourages that belief. And so, unless government wakes up to this reality, instead of living a life of denial, unless we wake up to this reality, that people actually wake up and have nothing on their table to eat, people begin to lose hope. When you have reached that stage of hopelessness, there's absolutely nothing you won't wish for to change that fortune. So it is important that our elected leaders listen. It is important that they take actions as quickly as possible to address this. It is important to hope and to continue to cling up to hope, but you have to be alive to even realize that hope.
All right. We'll come back to that. Let's quickly talk about your state, Nasarawa State. Would you say successive governments have lived up to the dreams of the founding fathers?
Thank you very much for this question. You see, Nasarawa State, when it was created, with a lot of pomp and pageantry, and the people hoped that we will now have a state where we call our own. But successive administration have dashed that hope, particularly of those of the indigenous people in Nasarawa State. I'll give you an example. When you are governed by people you didn't elect, it's the most, I would say, I'm almost short of words to describe that situation. Nasarawa State has been so unfortunate. It shares the largest boundary with the FCT. Instead of successive administrations taking advantage of the proximity to engender economic development of the state, comparable to other states that were created at the same time, Nasarawa State, particularly the capital, Lafia, is just a glorified local government headquarters. And no government appears to come to terms and reality with the need to develop that state. It's an agrarian state. It has a number of solid minerals too, but no concrete policies are done to develop that state. Almost as if the people who are in leadership position in that state do not believe that they owe the people a duty to develop the state. And that is why some of us are wont to think that I think there's almost a deliberate policy not to develop that state. It is unfortunate what we see in Nasarawa State. And one would have thought that with the increased revenue coming to the state now, I would have expected some concrete developments that would have placed that state in its rightful position. But there's nothing on the ground to show that Nasarawa State has taken advantage of its proximity to the FCT, to open up the corridors, to open up the industrial hub, to channel our resources in farming to produce enough food. Nothing is being done. Nothing.
Well, but I mean, how do you charge the current administration into developing that state at the moment?
The present administration is, unfortunately, in my assessment, one of the very worst we've had so far in Nasarawa State. My assessment. The governor came in with lots of promise, and we believed that somebody coming from a private sector background was going to accelerate the development of that state. But so far, there's been nothing, absolutely nothing, to even inspire hope that that was a possibility. I mean, look at the increased revenue we now have. No commensurate development on the ground to show, other than distribution of grains here and there, personally by the governor in the name of palliatives. Is it too much to ask that for an agrarian society like this, the governor should have thought about buying farm implements such as tractors to encourage farming? Is it too much for the governor to, undertake the revival of the many, many, many promising places, minerals in the state, take advantage of the minerals that are deposited in our state to participate in that sector and use the revenue derivable from that to develop the state? These things are not being done. Rather, Nasarawa State, a small backward state like us, has the largest number of first-class traditional rulers. And the entire thing that is being done is to service these rulers and service people who come from the state to take our revenues away. That is what is happening. It's unfortunate, and I hope that the governor will listen to well-meaning advice on how to invest and promote that state. Even the investment that were done by past administrations have all been sold out. We had a Nasarawa investment company which owned properties, which was producing water, which had a transport, an efficient transport system. All of this is gone. Houses have been sold out. Nobody is accounting for anything. So that is the system we have. They just come to Abuja, get the statutory monthly allocation, go there, share it, and then it's business as usual. No development is happening anywhere. None of the local government is doing anything. Activities take place at the local government headquarters only when it is month end to pay salaries based on what is dished out from the headquarters in Lafia. That's all. So we are a very, very sorry state. And I think this is largely because yes, we have a leader who is said to have been elected, but we know better. We know whom we elected.
All right, Mr. Matthew, let's take a break, and when we return, we will talk more. You're watching Politics Tonight, everyone. We'll take a break, and I will be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. This is Politics Tonight, and tonight we're focused on justice and politics in Nigeria, and I've been speaking with a legal practitioner, John Matthew. Mr. John, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Now, the last governorship election in the state was very, very competitive. What made the difference between winning and losing?
Well, the last governorship election, I think, was one of the most debated in the country because of the interest that was shown. There you have, in the public domain, INEC displaying the total votes cast in the election that can be accessed by anybody, showing that the People's Democratic Party won the election. You have the same INEC declaring another person as having won. Contest went through the court system, and the facts are out there. In fact, quite recently, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, who up till now as we speak, if you access the IREV and do the computation of the votes cast, you will know that that is the gentleman that won the election. On the 21st of this month, he took a trip back to his local government of domicile, that's at Akwanga, a distance of about 1 hour, 30 minutes from Abuja. The overwhelming crowd that came out to welcome that young man demonstrated quite clearly that this is the person that the people voted for. A journey of 1 hour, 30 minutes took over 7 hours, and an unprecedented crowd came out to welcome this young man. And I tell you what, even though the Supreme Court finally said it was the incumbent who won the election, the people who voted for him know the truth. They know the facts, and they came out en masse. And to demonstrate his credential as the people's choice, he initiated a program. Well, it wasn't a first time. It was a program that has been in existence before. But he enrolled about 13,000 residents of Nasarawa State into the National Health Insurance Scheme, where they will be able to access free medical care from that program. Now, this is a person who had just lost election, but this is what he's giving back to the community. This is outside of the many laudable programs he has done before, which resulted in endearing him to the people. There's no electoral ward in Nasarawa State that you won't find his presence in respect of the boreholes that he had created.
Mr. Matthew, the SDP won 2 Senate seats in the National Assembly election. What made this particular contest unique?
Sorry, I beg your pardon?
The SDP won 2 Senate seats. The
Yes.
SDP, the Social Democratic Party, won 2 Senate seats in the National Assembly election. So I'm asking, what made this particular contest unique?
Well, what happened in respect of that election is protest votes. If you really want to understand which party was on the ground, look at the state assembly elections. Look at the state assembly elections. PDP, the People's Democratic, SDP that you're talking about, has only 2 members in the House of Assembly of 24. The People's Democratic Party has, I think, 9 or 10 out of the 24. So I don't think the fact that you had two members in the upper legislative chambers is indicative of the strength of the Social Democratic Party in Nasarawa State. The party on ground is the People's Democratic Party, and the facts and figures are there in the public domain to see. What happened with the senatorial election was the individual candidates, both of whom were old members, one-time members of the People's Democratic Party themselves, and it was their individual capacities that endeared them to the people who elected them. It's not a barometer to determine the strength of the People's Democratic Party in Nasarawa State.
Well, I'm sure your stance is quite debatable, because there are those who say you're speaking from the point of being the lawyer that represented the PDP. But then it would seem that the Supreme Court concurred with INEC. I mean, as a validated election of governors, many believe that the court should not have the final say in our elections. Do you agree?
Well, whatever is created afterwards, you will still have the same problem of people complaining one way or the other. I think what needs to change, really, is for us to take a hard look at our laws and where it is necessary to make adjustments to make. I, for one, as a lawyer, will want to see that the burden of establishing a credible election in an election petition tribunal should be shifted to INEC. They conducted the elections. They ought to come and justify why the election should stand, where a person petitions the election petition tribunal. Unless we have this shift of burden, with the current way our electoral jurisprudence is evolving, with the kind of decisions, very sorry decisions that are coming out of our courts, it will be difficult, if not impossible, for any petitioner to establish his case, particularly in a large election like a governorship contest. The reason being that some of the principles that are being established by the court do not stand to reason. I'll give you an example. Why would it be required of you, who has sued an adversary to court, to approach that adversary, to give you his evidence by way of a written deposition so that you can file along with your case against him before the case even goes to court? It's impossible. I'm suing you. You are holding something, some form of evidence that I need to establish my case, and the law is requiring that I should approach you even before I file my case to give me that evidence by way of a written deposition to file against you. Nobody does that. Nobody is simply impracticable. But that's what the Supreme Court is saying, that you cannot subpoena somebody to come and give evidence in court anymore unless you have previously filed that witness deposition against that person in court. So INEC gets away with all the shenanigans they do in elections. I'll give you a practical example of what I saw during these last electoral trials. We saw electoral forms, that is the form EC8 is that the polling unit results doctored and being tendered in court by INEC itself, in contradistinction to the results that were in IREF and the certified true copies which they themselves gave to adverse parties. It happened. Nobody is being held accountable. The various decisions that have obtained some of their declarations based on the figures that they produced. Now, who came up with those? Where were those figures changed? Nobody is being held accountable. So unless we enforce the laws we have on this accountability, and then we also do a readjustment of our laws to now turn the burden of establishing the due conduct of election on INEC, we will continue to run through the same cycle. And one would have expected that our Supreme Court should have risen beyond technicalities in deciding some of these electoral disputes. Because democracy will not make any meaning when you don't have a person who is duly elected in office on account of technicalities. That a court such as the Supreme Court, which is not only a court of law and justice, is also a policy court. And if democracy is about the rulership of majority, policy should dictate that whatever considerations are there, if there are hard facts showing that this is the person who won as opposed to this, the court should be bold enough to make those pronouncements. Otherwise, the impunity will continue, and every electoral cycle will only bring forth completely unacceptable results, and then the cycle continues. People become disillusioned with our electoral process.
Right. So I guess that's you reacting to the electoral verdict of the Supreme Court on the Nasarawa governorship poll. But earlier you talked about how a huge number of residents of Nasarawa State came out to welcome the PDP candidate, David Ombugadu. I'd like you to tell me, how loved is he?
Sorry, the last?
I said earlier you talked about... right, earlier you were talking to me about how a huge number of residents came out to welcome the PDP candidate back into the state. So I'm asking, how loved is he in Nasarawa State?
Oh, I can tell you without any equivocation that David has done sufficiently to earn the love and trust of the majority of the people of Nasarawa State. If you saw the video clip of the people that turned out unsolicited on a working day, which I was informed was deliberately chosen so that we lessen the people who will come out to welcome the young man. If you saw the open affection that was shown, even during the contest, running through the courts from the declaration of the result up to the time the Supreme Court finally decided, you saw the protest by women, coming out openly to protest the rape. You note that the candidate has done sufficiently to warrant the love being shown. And it is not to be doubted, because this is a gentleman whom, right from his first tenure in the House of Representatives, took it upon himself to go beyond his federal constituency to sink boreholes to provide water for the communities across the state. All right. He took it upon himself to enroll quite a number of people in the National Health Insurance Scheme. He got employment for most residents across the state. So he from the word go, he has demonstrated a capacity to provide service to the society. And it is in reciprocation that the love you see being displayed towards him.
Right. So earlier you talked about, you were talking about whether or not we need to amend or review our Electoral Act. In what areas would you want to see improvement?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to see that the introduction of technology in the electoral process is strengthened with clear court guidelines about the mandatory nature of transmission of results in real time, so that sitting in your sitting room with access to your internet, you can do an arithmetic figure of the results as they come in. We need to do that. We need to strengthen our laws to make it mandatory, not optional, as part of the collation process. We also need to, at this stage, evolve to electronic voting. If there's sincerity of purpose, we're capable of doing so. We have shown in our association, Legal Practitioners, Nigerian Bar Association, we have demonstrated that in a smaller scale, that is achievable. Where our elections, we vote from your phone. Now, we can improve our electoral process to get to that level. It is only when people begin to have faith that their votes count, that there will be genuine participation and there will be respect for government that they were elected. And I had already earlier made suggestion that we need to upturn the burden of proof on INEC. Let them come to court to be the one to justify the due conduct of an election where a petitioner complains of undue conduct. So unless we do these things, we are not going to go anywhere. We'll continue to have the manipulation of the electoral process by people who have all the resources at their disposal. And lastly, I'd like to suggest too that it will be important for us to amend our laws to accommodate a conclusion of the electoral disputes before any party is sworn in, so that the undue advantage of the incumbency of office is not brought to bear in the dispute resolution mechanism, which, by the way, has taken a thorough beating in this last electoral cycle.
Mr. Matthew, your colleagues have also come on this program to say this is not practicable.
What is not practicable?
You just said that all of the election litigation should be concluded before swearing in of any political elected officer. So I'm saying that your colleagues have come on this show to also say this is not practicable.
I can't see how it's not practicable. It's just a question of adjusting the time the elections take place. We have put timelines on which we already have timelines in which the elections go through the court system. 180 days in the Tribunal of Trial, 60 days in the Appellate Court, and then 60 days in the Supreme Court. So if we adjust the timetable backwards to accommodate this time frame, definitely it's not impracticable. It's something that can be done. And if anybody who says to the contrary has to show how it's impracticable, it's just a question of adjusting the time. We hold elections earlier. We hold our elections earlier than the time frame, and that all it takes is to do a constitutional amendment.
All right, we'll see how that goes. The Supreme Court now has a full complement of justices. What is the implication of this?
Well, it is hoped that the backlog of cases that has piled up over the years can now be quickly resolved. It's a thing of concern that you have a case lingering for upwards of 10 to 15 years in the Supreme Court. This does not augur well for our justice delivery system. So now that we have a full complement of the court, I hope sincerely that they will attend to the cases, the backlog of cases expeditiously. If we have been able to manage and deal with the plethora of electoral disputes within time frames, I don't see how, tasking themselves, they should not be able to do this. But I will go further to say that we also need to think out with our Constitution to ensure that it is not every dispute that should go to the Supreme Court. For God's sake, a rent matter that starts from a district court has the capacity of traveling all the way to the Supreme Court. I don't think that is right. It is important for us to have some categories of cases that should be able to make their ways to the Supreme Court so that the Supreme Court lays down broad policy guidelines, lays down precedents which lower courts can now use in resolving disputes, which should end at those lower courts. If that is not practicable, it is also possible for us now to begin to consider regional Supreme Courts, where certain disputes must end at that level, so that we don't overclock the Supreme Court.
How can that be achieved?
It's done elsewhere in other jurisdictions. Take, for example, I'll give you an example. The National Assembly disputes, for example, now ends at the Court of Appeal level. So, if we have a constitutional amendment that says that, look, we're creating regional Supreme Courts at the maybe 6 geopolitical zones, that certain form of dispute only ends there. Once we have the law in place, it's not impracticable. Why should every dispute, every small dispute that starts from the court go up the way to the Supreme Court? You know, we only have one Supreme Court that sits in the federal capital here in Abuja. You can imagine if every litigant wants to contest his case up to the apex court, how many years it will take and the number of cases that will clock that court. So I think this is a time for us to really take a look at it, and so that our court can have enough time to consider deserving cases that are brought before them and give it the desired attention, so that the judgments we have there will have value and bearing on other cases.
In that regard, should there be a penalty for lawyers who bring cases termed as frivolous to the courts?
Oh, I think that's already been enforced. I have seen quite a number of instances where the Supreme Court, particularly, and even the Court of Appeal, has slammed sanctions on lawyers who have brought frivolous matters before them, matters they should know better not to bring. Quite recently, the Court of Appeal, I think in one matter where the PDP candidates, I think, who were removed by the Court of Appeal in Plateau, brought an application, I think, for judicial review. And the Court of Appeal slammed, I read in the news, about 8 million fine on each of about 16 of them. So I think it is important that where there's a clear case of abuse, where lawyers lend themselves to file matters they should know better, it is important that examples are set. But then it shouldn't be used as a means of dissuading genuine litigations where there's a need for one.
I mean, perhaps we need stiffer sanctions, because I remember about 800 out of 1,196 cases were dismissed in the 2023 election litigation cases. But then before we go tonight, the administration of justice in Nigeria, what are the issues and challenges in less than 2 minutes?
Well, I think one of the greatest challenge we have is the slow pace of the justice delivery system. We need to be able to relieve our judges of the need to write in longhand in proceedings in court. We also need to automate our courts so that the filing system is seamless, so that matters are filed quite expeditiously. Matters are determined quite expeditiously in automating court systems. And even the recruitment process, we need to take a very, very, very careful look at the recruitment of our judges. Recently, I noticed that in Kogi State, for example, the judges that were nominated for consideration, there was a pause to it by the NJC because people were nominating their cronies into judicial offices. So merit ought to be promoted more than anything else. If we do these things, we will enhance the quality of justice delivery system, and that will translate to a better administration of justice.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. John Matthew. I've been speaking with a legal practitioner as we focus on justice and politics in Nigeria. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening, and I look forward to more conversations with you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.
What if every woman felt included, empowered, and celebrated?
At Wema Bank, we're not just asking the question, we're taking action. Through our women-led initiative, Sarah, we're breaking down barriers and opening doors for women everywhere. We believe in empowering women through finance because we understand that financial independence is a crucial step towards inclusion. By providing women with the tools and resources they need to achieve their financial goals, we're not just empowering individuals, we're building a more inclusive society. Join us in celebrating International Women's Day on March 8th, 2024, as we inspire inclusion and empower women to reach new heights. Wema Bank, empowering women through finance. Together, we can inspire inclusion.
Wema Bank, with you all the way.
It's the greatest for me. Onga makes your cooking fun. Happiness, we go fill your belly. Enjoy the taste and aroma daily. Onga, onga.
Try the improved Onga Chicken Cube for great chicken taste and aroma.
Get in on the action with Betano, your exciting destination for sports betting. Enjoy an award-winning experience with amazing betting options, cash outs and missions, as well as other features. Join now and get a welcome bonus of up to 200,000 Naira. Betano.ng, the game starts now.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Wherever you see destruction, it's because God is absent. There is no destruction in God. So who started killing from Genesis? Satan. Jesus exposed him. The thief cometh not, but for to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But I am come that you may have life and have it how much? More abundant. I prophesy as your amen is coming like thunder. Whatever is yours, receive it now.
Kano State, the commercial capital of northern Nigeria, is on the march to progress and innovation with Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf in the saddle. Be part of the vision that is transforming Kano State into a hub for economic growth and opportunities. Hear directly from the governor as he engages the people, listens to their concerns, and shares his vision for a brighter future. Explore the developmental projects embarked upon by his administration to change lives, from infrastructure, healthcare, education to tourism. Watch the rich history of the culture and tradition of Kano and savor the vibrant spirit that unites the center of commerce on Kano Spotlight, Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
One of the world's most fascinating but endangered creatures is the pangolin. These unique animals, often referred to as scaly anteaters, are facing numerous threats. Pangolins are the only mammals in the world covered in hard scales, which protect them from predators in the wild. Unfortunately, this remarkable adaptation has made them highly desirable in the illegal wildlife trade. In this episode of Green Angle, we will be exploring the threats facing these incredible animals, the importance of their role in the ecosystem, and the ways we can work to protect them from further harm. Welcome. I am Esther Makwariola. Lagos is a low-lying coastal city endowed with a number of lagoons and wetlands. The wetlands, which are predominantly swamps and mangroves, act as flood control, a water purifier, nature's carbon sink, and serve as a home to endangered plants and wildlife. But growing land demands for developmental purposes is threatening this vibrant ecosystem. Esther Nosaroge, a conservation biologist, noticed a situation where some vegetation on the wetland area in Igomu, which also houses the National Arts Theatre, has been destroyed, and that some pipes are now laid across the area to fill it for some construction to take place.